welcome, and we shall make this very brief and snappy. Good afternoon, all, and I'm going to introduce our panelists for today's discussion. So our first panelist is Mr. GIUSEPPE LIPARI. Mr. GIUSEPPE is a member of is a steering committee member of the Global Students Forum, organizing Bureau of European School Students Union. Mr. GIUSEPPE, once again, you are welcome.
Thank you very much. Should I just present myself or also do the, okay, present my
yes, please, you can go ahead.
Nice to meet you all, even though in distant environment. I am Giuseppe Lipari. I'm from Italy, as you can see here from the accent, and I'm member of the steering committee of the Global Student student unions and organizations of schools and universities, including also the lovely friends of All Africa Student Union. And it's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, as was said, I'm originally from OBESSU, so the school student organization from Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. GIUSEPPE. And then we move on to Mr. ERICSON OCANTE. He is the president of the Plataforma Nacional das Associações Superiores de Guinea-Bissau. There's the French. And Mr. ERICSON, can you introduce yourself?
Okay. Thank you. I just want to know if our communication will be in English or Portuguese. Can you answer me? Hello. Hello. I didn't hear you. Your microphone is closed.
I'm saying that there's Portuguese. Speak English, we're good.
Okay, I'm going to introduce in English, but when I'm going to talk in Portuguese because it's more easy for me. Yes, thank you once again. My name is ERICSON OCANTE. I'm a president of Plataforma Nacional das Associações Acadêmicas do Ensino Médio e Superior da Guiné-Bissau. I want to thank the all students African Union for these 9 summits, and I'm so happy to be here and to give my contribution for our continent, for Africa, for students, for youth, and for education. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. So of course, we are moving on to Ms. Tina MUSOKE. Ms. Tina, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Tina MUSOKE. I'm with the Save Our Future campaign, and I will tell you a little bit more about what the campaign does in a few minutes.
Swift. The last person is Mr. Shadrach. Mr. Shadrach, can you please introduce yourself? Mr. Shadrach Impaki, can you hear us? Kindly unmute your microphone. Mr. Shadrach, we can't hear you. Kindly unmute your microphone. It does appear Mr. Shadrach has a challenge with the microphone, but we can go ahead and we ask the backdoor support team to help him. Our topic for discussion today is on the theme, Building Back Better in a Connected World. Our topic for today is on the theme, Building Back Better in a Connected World, Lessons from COVID-19 Pandemic and the Critical Role of Young People and Global Solidarity. One way or the other, I believe we've all been affected by COVID-19, and most especially with those in the educational sector, i.e. students, lecturers, and anyone at all who's very much involved with the academic society. I would want to know from each and every one of us, I mean, how COVID-19 has impacted us. And so I'm going to start with Mr. GIUSEPPE. Mr. GIUSEPPE, in your engagement with students in Europe and other parts of the world, how exactly do you think COVID-19 has affected the closure of schools?
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. So I should not change channel because I see there are many channels. Okay, I speak here. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for this opportunity. It will be a pleasure also to listen from you all. As always, it's a pleasure to stay in ASU events and follow what ASU is doing. Well, about tutoring in schools, what we could see since the beginning of the pandemic is that we had a deeper responsibility for two particular actors in education, especially in second level education. There are teachers and families, with both with some negative elements, because teachers, of course, were sometimes also forced to do extra work to follow a situation completely changing and a completely different educational environment. And also the tools at their disposal were not enough. For many of them, there were also, in many countries, there were delays in getting these online tools for working online. And also many students never had the private tools needed to join. So, personal computers or tablets or everything like that. And so this was a problem that showed, again, inequalities and injustices. But of course, the worst aspect of this situation for injustice was in families, because of course, having families needing to follow day by day, 24/7, your youngest members, they are students, and trying to create a good environment for them had no same tools and same resources. So some families were more skilled, also just with more money, also with just more space inside your houses, inside your family spaces, so physical spaces where to study, where to pay attention to the different subjects, and so also impacted a lot. And we can see, and we will see also, unfortunately, with the months, how learners from less privileged families will unfortunately achieve less results. Their conditions will be not as good as the ones of the others. We should consider also the aspect of mental health while we talk about the learning environment, because of course there is a lack of tools, there is a lack of training, also of the adaptation of tools and of services that were already available in person was not perfect when it was done by online. But also we have to consider the fact that in many cases, in many schools, also in the richest parts of the world, I think about Italy, for example, that is my home country, also in Italy, that is considered one of the most developed nations in the world. In reality, psychological services and the mental health services are absent from schools, with few exceptions. And these learners found to move their entire life online, and so cutting their personal relationships, cutting their contacts with the outside world, and so problems of mental health of a lot of different impact on their work that also impacted, of course, their work as learners. And it's again an injustice, because the families with more tools managed to give, with more resources, managed to give more resources to their children, while the others not. And it's also a missing. It's a problem for students' rights, because in theory, mental health is a right for all students. Then another aspect we should consider is that in general, the educational system was not ready. And in many countries, we saw that. Only some countries showed a good level of welfare. There was also adapted to online tools and to this kind of, modern, contemporary tools of work. But in reality, the majority of cases, we saw how the methods are not adequate. The tools are not adequate. Teachers and workers are not trained enough for this kind of new work, And of course, it impacts also their own rights. So it's really important that we also claim that the systems are anytime changed, and they are ready also to grant public education to everyone in every part of the world, and especially in every context. Lives don't stop, but our life continue, and we should also continue learning. And a key problem, for example, is vocational education and training. So all the aspects that are related to presence of learners in the workplace, and also everything that is related to experimental activity, also in science learning, all of these things, we had no replies, we had no solutions, and we didn't manage to move all of them online. So it means that many learners are losing this opportunity to learn, and they are not losing it for a month, they are losing for 6 months, 1 year, and we are seeing how long we should see how long this will last. So it's a big problem, and again, vocational education and training is unfortunately normally the less financed, and the sector of schools that receive the lowest investment from governments, and so it continues this way, with a sort of continuous discrimination of learners that is unacceptable. And so, going to the conclusion, I would say that the problem is that schools to be a key of their action, and so all the public structures should work and to also adequate the system to the new challenges we have in the future, and they are not impossible. How possible was to have a pandemic, and we should be ready to all different situations, because education is also important that public investments, so governmental investments, regional investments, are adequate to grant the public education for everyone, even during the worst situations, so this kind of crisis or following crisis that could come in the future, and we hope won't happen. So thank you very much. I hope I stayed in the time, and I think this is more or less what I could say in a general framework, of course, not trying to sum everything, because the world is quite big.
Sure, thank you very much, Mr. Giuseppe, and that thank you very much, Mr. Giuseppe, and that was a very good one. I mean, if there's anything that I picked up from in there, is the issues of inequality and injustice that COVID-19 has exposed within our society. And of course, then the mention of the need for innovation and technical education within the educational sector. And so I'll get back to you, but thank you very much. This has been very insightful. And then we move on to the next person. I'll call on Mr. Shadrach. Mr. Shadrach, please, is your audio good now? Can you speak up again to see if this is good to go?
Bonjour à tous.
Great, great. And so, Mr. Shadrach Impaki, my question to you is that with specific emphasis and experiences from Gabon, how has COVID-19 affected academic calendar in your country?
J'aurai besoin là de l'interprète.
Please, I was asking that with specific emphasis from your country, how has COVID-19 affected?
Oui, effectivement, je disais, j'ai besoin de l'interprète. L'interprète.
He's speaking French, and he want to know if you will have interpretation.
So I rephrase this question again. With specific emphasis to his country, Gabon, can you give us experience as to how COVID-19 has affected academic calendar in Gabon?
I speak French. I need an interpret.
Sure. So please kindly click on interpretation and select the language of choice. Please, are you good? Mr. Shadrach, are you good to go? Okay, well, Mr. Shadrach, yes.
En fait, il faut juste que l'interprète intervienne après moi. Je crois que je vois une main levée là.
Okay, so Shadrach to Mr. Erickson, what technical support offers the necessary support to Mr. Shadrach? So, Mr. Erickson,
Yes.
my question to you is that how have cuts in education budgets to support health budgets hindered education in your country? With COVID-19 has seen more government cutting budgets from education to support public health initiatives such as advocacy for washing of hands, provision of sanitary materials to help curb the spread of COVID-19. How has the cuts from the education sector to support public health affected education in your country?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. As way that I'm gonna talk in Portuguese. I'm gonna speak in Portuguese. I think interpretation can do it. I think it's able to do interpretation. Okay. Thank you once again. Bom, como eu disse, eu mais uma vez vou agradecer a união de todos os estudantes africanos pela organização do evento e agradeço a oportunidade dada a mim e a Guiné-Bissau e a plataforma em particular para podermos participar na 9ª Conferência dos Estudantes Jovens da África. Bom, abordando este tema e falando dos efeitos, os impactos neste momento no meu país, na Guiné-Bissau, sobretudo no setor educativo, começo por dizer que, antes disso, importa fazer, de certa forma, um enquadramento daquilo que é a situação de educação no meu país, em particular. Bom, como é evidente que é um problema não só da Guiné, mas é um problema da África. As nossas instituições são instituições, de certa forma, frágeis e que são instituições que funcionam com uma certa dificuldade. E a Guiné-Bissau não foge desta realidade africana e, sobretudo, no setor educativo. Nós temos um país que não consegue dar um acesso à escola a toda a sua população. Boa parte dos estudantes ficam de fora, desde o ensino pré-escolar, muitos não conseguem ter acesso à escola. Em muitas zonas do país não há infraestruturas escolares e mesmo a nível de ensino superior há poucas instituições disponíveis, tendo em conta o número de jovens disponíveis. Mas abordando a situação da Covid-19 em específico, bom, como aconteceu também em outros países, no mês de março deste ano, a findar já este mês, nós fomos abalados também com a pandemia que assolou o mundo, começando na China, e que as aulas foram suspensas neste período do mês de março. De lá, as aulas voltaram só a reabrir presencialmente a partir do mês de setembro. O mês de setembro, já 2 meses atrás que as aulas voltaram a funcionar. Mas importa fazer uma descrição daquilo que foi a realidade deste período de novembro, aliás, de março a setembro, como é que está a situação, como é que ficou a situação do ensino guinense durante esse infelizmente, a Guiné-Bissau não conseguiu, a par de outros países, adotar outros mecanismos dos estudos, por exemplo, os estudos à distância, por via da internet, ou por via de televisão ou rádio. Praticamente isto não funcionou aqui. Isto tem a ver com vários outros aspectos também. Para já, temos um país que a internet é muito fraca. Mesmo eu, nesta conferência, tinha que buscar vários meios para segurar e mesmo assim estou inseguro se, na verdade, conseguirei ir até o fim, porque às vezes a internet, ou outro momento, cai que não consegue. Então, esta internet, que tem uma qualidade muito fraca, não consegue, obviamente, mesmo os que dispõem da internet para ter as aulas livres, à vontade. E, além disso, é a própria acessibilidade da internet para a maior parte da população, em particular dos estudantes. Tem uma percentagem muito significante dos estudantes que não têm acesso à internet, que não têm acesso a novas tecnologias, aos meios, a um computador, a um telemóvel digital para poderem aceder às aulas. Então, isto, de certa forma, contribuiu para a não adoção de outras medidas para o funcionamento do ano letivo. Temos que dizer isso, mas temos um país que, a nível de organização curricular, não é de melhores, sobretudo a nível do ensino básico e secundário, em que podia, por exemplo, adotar as aulas via televisão ou via rádio. Mas o problema é ainda que haja condição para isso, ainda que haja meios de comunicação disponível para isso. Mas nós teremos o problema de organização curricular, porque não há uniformização dos currículos escolares. E a questão mesmo de a celeridade nos apontamentos recebidos não está no mesmo nível. Há certas escolas que vão findando o ano letivo, outros que nem sequer começam. Então, essas dificuldades todas contribuíram bastante para não adoção de outras medidas para o funcionamento das aulas durante o período da pandemia. Acrescido ainda de falta de meios, como eu disse, não há mesmo uma televisão pública que esteja em condições, o mesmo a nível da população, a televisão pública, a única que existe, só consegue cobrir praticamente a capital Bissau e não consegue chegar a outras regiões e que, mesmo chegando, a maior parte da população nas regiões não tem acesso a essas comunicações, a esses meios de comunicações e que, infelizmente, não vão conseguir, obviamente, ter acesso a essas aulas. Então, são esses problemas. Houve algumas instituições que tiveram algumas iniciativas que tentaram, de certa forma, adotar o mecanismo das aulas online, mas, em vez daquilo ajudar, até complicou entre a compreensão entre os alunos e a direção das instituições, sobretudo do ensino superior. Nós estávamos envolvidos na resolução desses problemas.
Okay, Mr. Ericson, you have 30 seconds more to finish your submission.
Okay, I'm going to close now. Só para continuar e mostrar que isto é um dos aspectos, mas eu iria agora entrar naquilo que é a realidade atual. Nós retomamos o ano letivo no mês de setembro. A nível do ensino superior, até este momento, a maior parte das instituições do ensino superior não conseguiram concluir o ano letivo, estão a concluir, outros recentemente concluíram, outros ainda a concluir neste mês de dezembro, para depois começar um ano letivo praticamente de forma mais completa no mês de janeiro e que vamos ter 3 meses de atraso devido à Covid. Então, esta é a realidade, sem falar de falta de meios de proteção nas instituições do ensino que não têm praticamente meios de prevenção, porque ainda estamos a viver a pandemia e que é importante a África, ainda que não tenha sido abalado como a Europa, mas é importante para não virmos entrar no colapso como entrou a Europa e o Ocidente. Bom, eu vou parar por aqui, como fui alertado. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, my brother. So I believe that, I mean, from the submission from my brother, it appears that the challenges that affected education because of COVID, it's worldwide. In fact, Mr. GIUSEPPE even spoke of the situation in Italy. I mean, even with the first world country, we're still facing challenges with COVID-19's impact on education. Having said that, we'll move on to Madame Carolina Pavanelli. Please, if you are here, can you say hi? I mean, Miss Carolina. Hello, Miss Carolina. Apologies, Miss Carolina messaged earlier. So let's move on to our sister Tina Musuke. Miss Tina Musuke, this particular question goes to you. In what ways could regional and sub-regional bodies complement the efforts of states towards addressing educational issues in moments of crisis?
Okay, so first, take us back a little bit.
Suivre des crises comme, comme de ce genre.
Did you know that COVID-19, 90% of the world's students on this planet had their education affected by COVID-19? Maybe the interpreter can go, the French interpreter can go mute.
So I press again.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm with the Save Our Future campaign, and what is Save Our Future is a global campaign that is made up of diverse voices, amplifying the voices of young people and children as they deliver a powerful, simple message, which is Save Our Future, Invest in Education. It is led by the largest organizations in education. So the World Bank, UNICEF, UNESCO, Education Cannot Wait, the Education Commission, the Global Partnership for Education, World Food Program, Education Above All, Save the Children, UNHCR, Education, Asian Development Bank, ADEA, which is the African Union, the African Development Bank arm on education across the continent. But the campaign is a lot bigger than that. And it is really, you know, we've been able to amass a lot of CSOs or NGOs, as I know it's called on the continent a lot, researchers, celebrities, foundations, corporations, media, all advocating for one thing, for increased investment in education. Why? Because we realize that education, though it is a victim of the pandemic, education is the one that's going to get us the doctors, the nurses, the teachers, and everything that is going to help us in long-term recovery on COVID. And as we all know, education is the foundation for all other global challenges. If we're talking about climate change, if we're talking about if we're talking about health, if we're talking about social justice, education is that tent pole. You know, unfortunately, what has happened I speak globally, is education has done a really big, I mean, COVID-19 did the facts are there. We talked about, the fact that we have the largest out of school population in the history of this planet. Like in the history, we have the large out of school population. But on top of that, almost overnight, most learning has become reliant on connectivity. Yet more than half the world's students don't have access to internet. On the continent of Africa, it's even worse because 89% of students in Africa don't have access to household computers, and 82 don't have a connection, an internet connection. So what does that mean? Then you have 63 million teachers around the world who are grappling with ways to make sure education doesn't stop. And with the fact that everything has become reliant online, 2/3 of teachers around the world don't have the skills to teach online. So again, what does that mean? Right? A World Bank report came out to say that what is happening now with the pandemic and so many students out of school or trying to learn or not learning the way they are is going to cost young people and all you young people who are in school up to $10 trillion in future earnings because of what is happening right now. And if you bring it down a little bit more, 20 million secondary school girls will never go back to school. And as you know, the gentleman from Italy also talked about, we know school is not just a place where people learn, where students learn. School is a place where students get their meals, their nutrition, their health, both physical as well as mental health. So what is all of this? What does this all mean when we have so many students out of school for the first time? And on the continent where, you know, inequalities are even bigger, because I think this pandemic has really shown the idea of the people who were already vulnerable are even more vulnerable to this. What does it mean? So the campaign has 3 demands, simple demands. Number 1, all students continue to learn during lockdowns through inclusive distance learning, whatever that means. We know, for example, in Kenya, what has happened is they have said all students are going to lose a year and start again. What does that mean for the future of Kenya, right? The second thing we say is every young person and child is supported to return to school, but only when it's safe to do so. Because we know if we're pushing students back to school or college or anything, and when it's not safe, it's just going to create even more and more of the pandemic. And the last, our third demand is that governments and donors and investors invest more in education so we can build better, more inclusive, and more resilient education systems for the future. So those are our 3 demands. But I think what we need to understand is right now we're in an education crisis. We say we're in the biggest education crisis of our lifetimes. But even before COVID hit, education across the world was already in crisis. 260 million children were not learning. In low-income countries, which, let's be real, 95% of Africa is, or 99% of Africa is, 90% of students by the age of 10 could not read a simple text. So we were already in a crisis, and now we have to avert this becoming a catastrophe. How are we going to make sure, you know, we do that to ensure that this is how we're pushing and this is what we're doing? So again, we have those 3 demands. Number 1, students continue to learn. 2, everybody supported when it's safe to do so. And the third one, again, is the most important, is the investment in education so we can reimagine education systems. Why? Because we believe that this COVID is a problem, but it's also an opportunity. Because how are we going to use this time to reimagine, reboot, and relearn how we have this education system, right? We know, I don't know about you guys, but when I was in college, a lot of the books I was reading were books that my professors had written, and they wanted me to read so they could cram and they could get their money, but it was just cramming. Is that education? Is that it? How are we making sure children are learning and are not just cramming? How are we making sure that you're building a whole child and you're a whole student and someone that's out? How are you making sure that when doctors are coming out, they know as much practical as they know theory? How are we using this as an opportunity to do that? So I will end by just saying that you know, the Save Our Future campaign is happy to be here. Please, if you want, you can follow us at saveourfuture.org, saveourfuture.world. We all have a role to play in this. It doesn't matter if you're in Lagos, Lilongwe, Kampala, Cape Town, Dodoma, you know, if you're in the diaspora like me, we all have a role to play to be able to do this, because we know that we are about to lose 30 years of progress in education, and we all have to be at the center of it. Thank you.
Thank you too, my sister, and this has been very insightful. One thing that I very much appreciate from this, your submission, is the solution to this pandemic. Let me go over to check if our other panelists have been able to make appearance. If not, we shall go back to ask for questions, and then we shall be getting to the end of this our session. Is Caroline back with us?
Yes, hello, I'm here.
Yeah, hi, Caroline. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this session. I will be speaking in English, if there's any need for the translations to switch, just like the previous speaker, Tina, and thank you very much for the enthusiasm and the introduction to this topic, which is incredibly important. Just start to introduce myself, if I may. I am
so we already run out of time, but you have 1 minute to introduce yourself and say everything about your organization, and then we can go straight to your question that as an educationist, do you envisage a decline in school enrollment in the next academic year? You have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. So my name is Caroline SUNBERG. I work as Policy and Research Officer at the European University Foundation, also acronymed EUF. The EUF was funded in 1999 in Luxembourg, in Luxembourg City, in Europe. And the aim of the organization or foundation is to accelerate the modernization of European higher education, and mainly through 5 pillars. We want to increase and to ensure quality mobility, employability of the students, graduating, make sure that it's a good quality digital higher education, and to encourage and to make ways for active citizenships. And the 5th pillar is the one where I'm working mainly, which is the policy innovation, where we are looking at making, or my policy portfolio is looking at how to make greater social inclusion in higher education for all students, despite background, but also not only to access education, but also to completion. Besides my work with the European University Foundation, I'm also one of the governing council members of the Magna Carta Observatory, defending academic freedom. And if you haven't seen it already, we have a new Universitatum that was launched earlier this year, mainly focusing on a global perspective, so moving away from the roots, which is rather European, to see what can be done. And this, for this purpose, we need the students' voices, and we also need you to fight for your rights. And especially if you have your university or higher education institution who have signed this declaration, you have all the rights to be given to be able to fight and also to claim rights from the governing council in supporting you in doing so, and which makes you have the more possibility to defend and to be active and participate in the decision-making processes of the institution. So it's just a little shout out for the separate part. Regarding the question, did I understand it correctly that you want to learn more about, can you repeat the question, please?
So Caroline, as an educationist, do you envisage the effect of the crisis that we are going to have a decline in enrollment next year, in the next academic year? Okay.
Thank you for the question. I've been thinking a lot about it, mainly from the perspective of looking at both the educational systems and the educational reforms as I am working with the policy. What we currently see with the pandemic is only the top of an iceberg. We were in crisis before, educational one, and thank you very much for mentioning that before, and we won't be getting less of it after following the COVID crisis. Looking at inequalities that already existed won't be less, and that is what I would argue for being what is the part of the iceberg that we can't see or that we don't really think about. What I would mention is mainly, of course, because of the crisis, which it is, namely, we will see the financial crisis coming, if it has not already started, which would both affect the financing of education for the individual, if there is tuition fees, but also in the financing of the governmental systems if it's public institutions. It will have an impact as well on individuals, and in Europe, very many students have a student job in order to be able to sustain themselves and participate in higher education, which is jobs that which do not exist anymore. They already stopped existing or ceased from existing, and we won't see them coming back in the near future, which will have a direct impact, of course, who can enroll. The solution, of course, and the major, biggest idea to make sure that this will not have as a great impact would be, of course, if the systems of all kinds of education would be mainly quality education funded by public means, and of course then meaning that it will be free of charge for individual and accessible for all students or prospective students to enroll. We are not there. Not all institutions are public. Luckily, the ones that are members of the European University Foundation are public universities. However, we need to get our member state, like the European member states at least, which is the focus area for us, to agree on financing and investing in education, but also doing so without having an agile. Because on the other side, and still underneath the water, of the iceberg, we have the problem of ideologically and politically driven agendas within public funding of institutions, where we see demands of which education is not supposed to be considered to be beneficial enough for society, and then hence doing budget cuts. We see it mainly within humanities. We also see it when it comes to the opinions of political powers, assuming that something is not useful for society, such as gender studies has been considered and argued. This is two different topics that are extremely valuable in order to rebuild the society and also to develop and further the critical thinking of the students. We see, of course, and it was mentioned already before we ended up switching to everything to be online, was the filter bubbles and also the acceleration of the societies that comes with it, that only believes in what they see. And for this, and to counter this, we need even more investments in public higher education, and especially when it comes to free and academic research that is done outside of the political filters. So for the next semester, but also the years to come, the main importance is definitely to invest more education. We will see less students, unfortunately, but we can always hope that there will be investments in the common society, in the greater public system. And what is also good to mention, it's of course, like, while we have the pandemic as one crisis, besides the educational one as well, and that is the climate one, which we should never forget, and especially not when thinking that, of course, now we transferred our society to be an online society rather than a physical one, and all negative ones. But the climate change is still real, and it is happening, and definitely it happens while we are using internet and electronics more than ever, and consuming it is also consuming our planet. So that's why we both, of course, need education. We need funding for education, and we need access for all to education. Thank you.
That's a wonderful submission. As a means of following up, what has been your organization's approach to dealing with this? Are you trying to form partnership just to, engage civil societies, engage government to help provide the needed support for students to go back to school, especially the girl child, because in our part of the world, it's normally the girl child who are normally affected by such situations. If you come to West Africa and some places that I know of, situations like this, the men are asked to go to school and the girls to go to farm, and support the household to the family going. What has been the interventions of your organization to try to mobilize the basic support to keep the students back in school?
Our main campaign that we have done, of course, we did two major campaigns when we saw that society locked down. One part, mobility, so international mobility between the countries, in order to not end up having difficulties returning back home, or to be able also to plan the future and make sure that they could maybe participate in the future in a mobility somewhere else. We set up a tool which was on a website where we show the status of the different institutions, like if they're accepting students and if they're sending students, also for the students to know. So that is one part, and that is like what we did for the moment. That was the first part to make sure that students would not end up having more problems with their situation than the pandemic already was causing for them. Regarding keeping students and pupils in school, as we are focusing on higher education institutions, and mainly from a European perspective, and as the fund diverse within Europe, what we have been fighting for is for the European budget to not lose means when it comes to finances to support students to enroll, but also to participate in education, which we also have so far. If the budget is approved by the European member states, will then show that even if they took, there is a recovery budget, maybe I should mention, there is a recovery plan for Europe, which meant that the long-term budget of the EU was cut to be able to finance this recovery plan. That was also then taking money from what was normally supposed to be for education, which made it would be, of course, a recovery plan is one thing, but if the recovery doesn't take into account or invest in education, it's extremely difficult to accelerate and regenerate the society. So we argued and lobbied for the education budget to not be as you see. So it's just under approval now by the member states, and hopefully it will be approved shortly, which will mean then that there will be more money. So both a recovery plan, but also more money for education following the crisis to allow.
Right. And so this is great. Thank you very much. Tina MUSOKE, please be on standby. I'll go to GIUSEPPE for a brief feedback on the question that I'm about to throw to him, so that you give your closing remarks. But GIUSEPPE, LIPARI, your next question, the question I have for you, should states consider setting up funds with special purpose of supporting educational systems in times of crisis?
I think that, thank you first of all for the question. I think, of course, yes. I think it's key that also ministries are able to spend money in a fast way. So it's not just to say, do we need to have money allocated at any emergent situation? Of course, yes, but the key problem is that how fast can you be in answering the problems? I can make you really examples from everywhere. Ones, so I just talk about the negative ones, I'm sorry. But for example, we had governments that planned the supply of hundreds and thousands of, for example, tablets for the poorest children. Months, 7 months before them doing these measures. What does it mean? Can you think in advance everything happens? No. Can you be ready for emergencies with faster procedures inside the ministries? Yes. But much more important, can you avoid that any emergency make the system collapse? Absolutely yes. And you can do that through welfare, through stronger public services. And so, it's also, if you want to be stronger in the extraordinary, you need to be stronger and enough in the ordinary, and much more than enough in the ordinary. So we see that the countries with, for example, a higher literacy and higher online literacy in education manage it better than the others, because they were used, it's normal for them to have, I think in Northern Europe, there are some cases like that. These countries had already almost all the students with availability of these tools. Teachers were trained to do that. So, they of course had problems, also important problems for this situation of pandemic, of pressures, but not total,
Thank you. So that was insightful. Ms. Tina MUSOKE, let me ask you your last question and also add your closing remarks, within a minute and in some 30 seconds. And please, your question is that the internet has been very helpful in transferring knowledge, but has it been helpful in grasping the times of COVID-19? And what specific, impact has it had concerning the areas of your, interventions? How has the internet affected education in times like this, based on the work you have done with your foundation?
Sure. So just first of all, I'd like to say we are not a foundation. We are a campaign of which, ASYS is a member of, and we're very happy to be that. As I said earlier when I was talking about the facts, is learning has become reliant on connectivity and a way for students to be able to learn during this time when people are at home. And that is great. But again, we have to realize that who are the people that have access to this internet? Who are the people that have access to household computers? They are the privileged. Everyone on this call, on this video, is privileged because you're able to do 9% of people in Africa who don't have, students who don't have it. So I think the internet has definitely been a blessing, but we cannot just depend on the internet to be able to do this. What we always say is that every stimulus package that governments are talking about, or the AU, or whatever it is, has to include education in it. Every stimulus package for COVID has to have education in it, because that is the only way we're going to recover from this, from a health perspective, from, when we're pushing climate, safety measures, everything. We need to be able to invest in education, realizing that the internet is not a catch-all for everybody. Thank you.
Ms. MUSOKE, your contribution to this engagement has been very wonderful. I mean, we shall take one last question. And then this question, I believe, goes to Caroline. It says that, what advice do you have for students who have already registered for their university but are yet to start classes?
One advice would be, first and foremost, of course, education, if it's supposed to take place online, but it was never planned or intended to take place online, I just hope that resources have been invested in order to support for the transition, to make sure that it's high quality education. So you do receive the quality and the interaction and engagement in your education as you would have received if it would have been taking place in person. That is number one. Number two is that don't forget that you have rights, and don't forget that you have colleagues and fellow students. And don't forget that you can still communicate, and make sure to communicate and even challenge yourself. Of course, it's a little bit more difficult to reach out to someone when you have never met the person before, or you haven't discussed, but do it and really take those opportunities, and also ask for this from the teachers and lecturers to make sure that they do create a community for you to grow strong together and to be able to raise your voices together, because you do have rights, even if it's online, and I just hope that it's going to be of good quality.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Caroline. Can we have a closing remark from ERICSON? ERICSON OCANTE, if you're here, can you give us a closing remarks for us to wrap up this session?
Okay. Yes. Can you repeat again the question?
I'm saying that, I mean, give us your closing remarks. I mean, your final submission for this session. Generally, what's your overview of the interaction here thus far?
Okay. Thank you. I understand. Yes. I'm going to continue in Portuguese because it's more easy for me to speak in Portuguese.
Okay.
Yes. Só para aquilo que é o nosso ponto de vista, falando do tema da Covid. Bom, na minha primeira intervenção, eu fiz mais uma abordagem descritiva daquilo que é a realidade, sobretudo a realidade guinense, da situação do ensino e os efeitos da Covid no ensino guinense. Mas, tendo essa última oportunidade, quero falar daquilo que deve ser a visão, as perspectivas que devemos desenhar para os próximos tempos. E digo que a Covid-19 nos assolou e matou muitos dos nossos concidadãos africanos e no mundo inteiro, mas também é uma oportunidade para nós, sobretudo a África em particular, uma oportunidade de nós erguermos, de nós estarmos preparados. Tivemos a sorte de ser o continente menos afetado, mas isto é um sinal para nós que devemos preparar melhor para enfrentar. Ninguém deseja uma doença, mas é importante sempre uma preparação para tanto combater a nível da saúde pública sobre as doenças, mas também sobre a necessidade da adoção daquilo que devemos combinar, por exemplo, a nível do setor educativo, para andarmos juntos e termos um ensino de qualidade funcional. Ok? Muito obrigado.
Great. Thank you very much. And it's most unfortunate we've got to bring this to an end. I mean, I've enjoyed myself. I believe our panelists and our speakers together with our listeners have all enjoyed this particular session. The next session continues on YouTube, and would advise all of us to follow the various channels of the All Africa Students Union via Facebook, via Twitter, via YouTube, via Instagram to continue with the sessions. And so on behalf of the All Africa Students Union, I would want to thank Mr. LIPARI, the steering committee member of the Global Students Forum. I would also like to thank Mr. Shadrach Impaki, though unfortunately could not, because of internet connectivity issues, could not really be part of this session, who is the president of the National Students of Gabon. We would also like to thank Madam Carolina Pavanelli, an education practitioner from Brazil, for her wonderful contribution to these engagements. And of course, my brother ERICSON OCANTE, who is the president of the students of Guinea-Bissau. We would also like to thank Madam Carolina SUNBERG, European University Foundation Policy Department, for her contribution to this engagement. And lastly, but not the least, Ms. Tina MUSOKE, whose energetic submission has made this session very engaging. Once again, thank you all. Please let's connect on YouTube for the next session. God bless you all.
Okay, thank you. God bless you.